And we want to welcome you for those watching by YouTube. Uh, Later, we want to welcome you to our Zoom Wednesday night class for Parkway Church of Christ. And tonight, we are going to continue a study that we were doing in the auditorium uh, for a good while, and we were also doing on the Zoom calls prior to us going back to the auditorium, which is on the restoration movement. For those who might be watching this later by YouTube and you don't know what we're talking about, it is not the Reformation movement. That happened in the 14 and 1500s and 1600s. That was the Reformation, and what they wanted to do was reform the already existing Catholic Church. That was the whole point of the Reformation movement during that time, was that they wanted to go into that and be able to reform the Catholic Church. That was what they wanted to do. The restoration movement, which we talk about, which is the American, what I dub the American restoration movement, because we've talked about it on the Zoom calls and we've talked about it in the class, that there were people, whether they were known or whether they were underground. When I say the word underground, I don't mean literally underground, but it was more of like Underground Railroad back in the 1860s. It was more of, it was not known to the mainstream majority. That there were people that were trying to restore the New Testament church and New Testament order for years after the events of the second, third, and fourth centuries, when the Catholic Church came in and tried to put a stranglehold on Christianity. What some people did was they realized very quickly that what was going on was wrong. What the Catholic Church was doing was completely wasn't about face from what the Bible said. And so and I'm giving this little overview so we can catch back up to what we're talking about. So by the time you get to the time of about 1750, and you see what has been going on over the last 200 years in Europe. And there are things that we've talked about on these in these classes to discuss that there were people who were trying to restore the New Testament church prior to Thomas and Alexander Campbell coming to this country, and prior to them even being baptized into Christ. That there were people who were trying to do this, and there were churches. We discussed at length about churches that were in Kentucky and Tennessee and the state of Alabama that were established as churches of Christ and still meet to this day, who were established prior to Alexander Campbell and Barton W Stone and Thomas Campbell leaving their respective denominations. And so we've got to remember that when we talk about church history, when we talk about the Restoration movement, yes, it is good to talk about these men and their accomplishments and what they did. And that's what we're going to be doing tonight, is trying to continue our look at Alexander Campbell. It's very good to talk about these men. But when we do talk about these men, we do not need to put them on a pedestal to say that they founded the church, because they didn't. They just helped others see the light that denominationalism is not right, and it goes against the Scripture. Denominationalism goes against Scripture. So that's what we're discussing. That's what we're trying to discuss. And so we're going to share the screen if I can find, there we go. And I'm going to get this going here. So y'all should be able to see that. And that is our PowerPoint. As y'all remember, we discussed before that Alexander Campbell, let me see if I can get this thing to work. Hold on. Whoop, there we go. So we talked about that Campbell was baptized in Buffalo Creek. This is Buffalo Creek in Virginia, and he was baptized in June of 1812. The issue is that at this point, he is still not fully understanding of what he's getting into. And he is going to eventually realize what he's doing is still not going with the New Testament order. So in 1813, remember that he's still not a member of the church, as far as he has not fully broken away from denominationalism. Let me put it that way. He is still not fully broken away from denominationalism. But in 1813, he is going to take over his father-in-law's farm from John Brown. This house still stands. And we're going to talk about this later, but this house is now on the National Historic Registry of Homes. It cannot be demolished, and it has to stay in the same. It has to look the same as it did. They have to, if they do any remodeling to it, it has to be in the vein of what it looked like during that time. They can put some modern comforts in there, like air conditioning and all that, obviously. But they cannot do anything aesthetically to bring it more modern. They have to keep it that way. The same goes for if you go over to Freed-Hardeman's campus and you go to Old Main, which is the main which was the main campus building for years on Freed-Hardeman's campus. The building itself is on the Tennessee Historic Registry and the National Historic Registry. So when they went to remodel the building there on Freed-Hardeman's campus, what they did was they had to go in and bring in architects that said, we will not touch the outside of the building, because you cannot touch the outside of the building. But on the inside, they could bring it more to the modern setting, as far as they could change the wood to make sure that the wood on the wood floors was going to be brought up to modern code, and they could add an elevator, which has never been done in Old Main. They could add an elevator to it, but it could not change the layout of the building. It could not change or add to the building that already existed. So they had to work within the confines of what they already had. Same goes for Alexander Campbell's mansion. It can be modernized in different things to bring it up to code, with air conditioning and stairs that meet modern code, but they cannot change the layout or add to the building itself. So that's an interesting side note. So when we look at this, we are now up to 1814, and Alexander Campbell is 26 years old. And there's going to be some big things happen during this time period for Alexander Campbell. One of them is that he is going to go east and start uh, gaining funds to start putting in meeting houses for different people. He goes to Philadelphia, to New York, to Washington, D.C., and he's going to start soliciting funds to build a meeting house at Wellsburg. He secures $1,000, which in those days is a lot of money. That is a lot of money for what he's wanting to do. And so we talked about this last time we were together, discussing this particular set of discussions. But I want to run through this one more time, which this is, if you want to call something the key to Alexander Campbell starting to change his tone in how he talked about the Bible, it comes here in 1816. We see that he's going to be at Brush Run. The Brush Run Church joins the Redstone Association of Washington. August of 1816, he is associated with Cross Creek Baptist Church. He's going to be there to help conduct a meeting there. And the preacher at this particular church was Elder Pritchard. And the way they did these meetings, the way that the Baptists did these meetings, according to the association, was that they would bring in several preachers from the surrounding region, and they would each have one night to volunteer to preach for that specific night. And they had to preach on a certain topic. And so Alexander's just there. He's a 26-year-old guy. He's not really much into this yet. But one of the preachers gets sick. And when he gets sick, they don't have a replacement. And Campbell, as wily as he was during his life, and as cool and collected as he was, he volunteers. And this message is later going to be referred to as probably one of his best messages he delivered throughout his lifetime. And notice what it says, that later referred to the message as rather extemporaneous. It was more off the cuff. He really wasn't fully prepared. So he just comes up with this lesson, and he entitles it "The Sermon on the Law." And he talks about rightly dividing the word of truth. And he will also, in the midst of that same meeting, say in that sermon that we don't need to be underneath man-made creeds and catechisms. Well, that's when this man, Elder Pritchard, gets super mad. He comes up with a group of preachers that's there, and they said, well, if we're going to do this, we can't force him out right now because everyone is listening to the message. We can't push him to go back on what he said. So we'll just go and tell him that he's wrong, and that he needs to change his tone after he preaches. Well, when he does this, it marks his separation from the Baptists. He is gone. Remember, he's gone from the Presbyterians. So now he's gone to the Baptists. But now he realizes, wait a second, I'm not even a Baptist. I can't go again. I can't go with this, knowing that they're going along with creeds and confessions of faith as well. So he is very much in his head, trying to figure out what he is. He's trying to figure out what he believes. And this Sermon on the Law starts him down that road. Well, now let's get into what we're going to discuss. In 1818, he's going to try to open up the Buffalo Seminary and board young men in his home. Now, this is going to prove a challenge to him, and we'll get to that here in just a minute. But part of this house originally did not exist. He added to this house, to this mansion, to try and add the seminary. So, ladies, they were not only living there, but he was also teaching a seminary there with young men there, and they also had kids of their own. So how difficult would that be? This was his study. And notice here up top, on the top of this little library, is a little obelisk full of windows. That was the only light source for that entire library. It is said that sometimes he would spend upwards of 10 hours at least in that little room. And that's really what it was, is a room, just studying and writing and doing all of that. He spent 10 hours, 12 hours in that room. And so he's going to start doing all of this, and he starts releasing some articles and some monthly publications. The first one, July 4th, Independence Day of 1823, he releases the Christian Baptist. And he goes ahead and closes the Buffalo Seminary because they just didn't have any kids coming to it. I mean, within just a few years, they had to close because they didn't have enough boys coming to it to keep it open, and they didn't have enough money to keep it open. So by the time you get to October, he's going to go horseback 300 miles to Kentucky. And he's going to visit a man. He's going to take along with him a man by the name of Sidney Rigdon. Sidney Rigdon is very crucial to this because he is a Baptist preacher at this time. And he follows Alexander. He's with Alexander in a lot of things. And in backing up a little bit, hold on. There we go. Backing up 3 years before we get to that trek in 1823, he debates John Walker at Mount Pleasant, Ohio, on the subject and action of baptism. August 30th, Mahoning Association is formed. He takes the position, Campbell does, that baptism is essential to salvation. He takes the position at that time. He takes the position that it is something that must be done for the Christian to be right with God. 1821, Adamson, Bentley, and Sidney Rigdon visit Campbell at his home. When they talk to him, they become convinced. Bentley and Rigdon become convinced that what they were doing and what they had been taught for a number of years was wrong, and they start embracing the motif that Alexander was teaching at this time. And so Sidney Rigdon becomes the preacher for the church at Pittsburgh there in Virginia. Okay, now going back to this whole situation with going back to 1823. That gives you backstory as to why Sidney Rigdon is with Alexander when he goes to Kentucky in 1823. They are going to go up there, and he's going to debate a Presbyterian by the name of William McCullough. And William McCullough was a very outspoken Presbyterian preacher. According to Campbell, this was his little slight at McCullough, is that according to him, McCullough was smoke in their eyes and a thorn in their sides among the Baptist community at that time. In Mason County, Kentucky, Washington, Kentucky to be exact, they're going to have a debate on baptism. He's going to study and he's going to print this debate. This is the first print debate that he has had. He has a public debate and then he puts it into print. And there are people who still have copies of the original debate that was printed. You can go to certain places. I believe you can go to the Christian Church headquarters in Nashville, I believe, and they have a first edition of the debate between him and McCullough. The reason why this debate is important is because this is going to start showing the Baptists even that he is not with them anymore. That he does not want. He wants to go back to the Bible. That's all he's caring to do. And there are going to be certain Baptist ministers who are going to be very aggravated at this. Especially because he debates on Christian baptism, and McCullough takes the premier Presbyterian position that it's not essential, and that babies need to be baptized as well as adults, and all this kind of stuff. And so Walter Scott and Thomas Campbell help him prepare for this. So in this discussion, it becomes apparent that Campbell is going to really start changing his belief. One point to make about this, and we've talked about it before, but just to give you a little sidebar, B.F. Hall, we talked about him earlier, but he found a copy of the debate, and he did read it. And in his preaching, many had come to the mourner's bench and found no relief. They said, we don't feel like we've changed. And when he read the debate and saw what Campbell was teaching on baptism for the remission of sins, he raised his hands and said, Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. He realized at that point that baptism was essential. With this discovery, the purpose of baptism quickly spread throughout his congregation, but also throughout the congregations throughout. They changed their name. B.F. Hall, the name of the church he's at, changes their name to reflect the New Testament. And so a lot of this is taking place within a very short amount of time. And give you a quick side note, because I've given you all a lot of information, and if y'all have any questions, then feel free to unmute yourself and ask. But one problem that's going to arise, and we're going to get to it here in a few minutes. One problem that arises in this is that, and this is just my personal opinion, I believe that Alexander Campbell started believing his own hype in certain respects. because he's going to back certain things that are going to cause some problems down the line, especially when he passes away in the 1860s. He's going to back certain things that are going to be the source of some division that happens in the late 19th century, and what will lead to the eventual split in 1906 between the Christian Church and the Churches of Christ. And what takes place over the next few years, in what we're going to be discussing, that is what I just said about 1906. That was a result, may not have been a direct result, but it was a result of what took place in the 1820s, 30s, and 40s that would lead to the eventual 1906 split. So, Redstone Association is ready to expel that Wellsburg church that we just talked about. They withdrew. The Wellsburg church withdrew before that took place. The Redstone Association was going to withdraw. Was going to expel them. They withdrew. Wellsburg was received into the Mahoning Association. He goes to Kentucky to tour Kentucky with men like Raccoon John Smith and Barton W Stone. Raccoon John Smith has not left denominationalism yet either. He is still a Baptist at this time, and he introduces him to Barton W Stone. And they begin a series there in Kentucky called Restoration of the Ancient Order of Things. This is going to lead to what is probably known as the best few years of the early Restoration movement in America that we see. Because what we encounter is that, to give you a little backstory, 1827, his wife dies. He's 39 now. His wife dies. He publishes the Living Oracles, the Sacred Writings of the Apostles and Evangelists of Jesus Christ, commonly styled the New Testament, translated from the original Greek by Doctors George Campbell, James McKnight, and Philip Doddridge. Walter Scott elected as evangelist of the Mahoning Association. So all this happens in 1827. Walter Scott begins to start preaching, and he publishes the first hymn book that is known within the Restoration movement. Second edition of Living Oracles is put out in 1828. And then this happens. This is probably Alexander Campbell's most well-known debate, is the Campbell-Owens debate. Robert Owen challenges him to debate the claims of infidelity as opposed to religion. Robert Owen is going to challenge him on the basis of the fact that on the existence of God. Robert Owen is an atheist. 1829 happens. This is a picture of Robert Owen. And 1829, April 13th through the 21st, happens in the Methodist Church at Cincinnati, Ohio. Notice this, and I've got a couple of elders on here with me. Alexander Campbell spoke for 12 hours straight. If I'm not mistaken, 12 hours straight. There were breaks between, but he did have 12 hours of uninterrupted speech. He goes through the complete principles of the Reformation and everything, the existence of God and all of this. This is still used. The Campbell-Owen debate is still used in New Testament theology and in systematic theology classes on the undergraduate and graduate levels in college because of how detail-oriented this debate was. Robert Owen and Campbell had a mutual respect for each other. It was almost like a precursor to what would take place between Thomas B. Warren and Andrew Flew from the 1960s when they debated each other on the existence of God. They had a very mutual respect for each other, but they despised each other's beliefs. And so it was very much something that was a sight to behold, according to eyewitness accounts who were there. And all this spreads to England and Ireland. People from all over the world hear about this debate. It was the first time in that time frame, in that time period, that a prolific Christian had debated a prolific atheist in the public setting. No one had done this. No one had done this publicly in years. So this 1 week of speeches and classes and things of that nature takes place, and it is known throughout the world. So he becomes elected. Alexander Campbell does, due to all of this popularity. I mentioned a few moments ago that he started really getting to this pop culture status, and he attends the Constitutional Convention of Virginia. There's a artist depiction of what it looked like, and there is where Alexander Campbell would have sat. Artist depiction of where he would have sat in that convention. James Madison said that he knew he stood in the presence of him. He regarded him as an expounder of the scriptures, one of the most original expounders and ablest expounders of the scriptures he had ever heard. Now, James Madison was a theist, as most of those founding fathers and founding presidents of our nation were. They were theists. They didn't really adhere to a particular religious body. They just believed in God, and they had a belief in the scripture as it pertained to the creation. But a lot of them didn't have a really big hold on any type of salvation, as it were concerned. Robert E. Lee also said some stuff about him. Said that he that he had knowledge, would have suggested a grand idea of the human race. He was a representative of a species to one of the many superior worlds. Robert E. Lee said that of him, of Alexander Campbell. 1830, and I'm going to stop here because I want to ask a couple of questions. 1830 rolls around, and he's going to get into the Millennial Harbinger. He's going to push himself away from the Baptist moniker. July 5th, he is going to issue the last issue of the Christian Baptist, and he starts putting out this publication called the Millennial Harbinger. We're going to just move forward. I want to get to this slide right here. And this is why I said that between 1824 and 1830, it was very, very crucial to the American Restoration movement. Is that 1831 rolls around, and Barton W Stone meets with Alexander Campbell again. But under these terms, they meet in Lexington, and they are going to combine their efforts to work as one group. The group that Alexander Campbell was a part of, the Disciples of Christ, and then the Christians, or as would later be known as the Churches of Christ, Barton W Stone. This would unite a membership of almost 10,000 within that state and across the few states that they were a part of. It's interesting to note, and I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to bring this over for us to discuss. It is interesting to note, guys, that we know all of this information about these guys, but it took them. If you look at their lives show a progression of thought that a lot of people today don't have, because they don't put themselves into this book right here. As I mentioned, Alexander, he studied a lot. He studied a lot. 10 hours a day in some respects. Don't you think that it would benefit the church greatly, benefit personal lives greatly, if we would put more time and effort into study like that? Why do you think, and this is, I want, if you want to unmute yourself, why do you think we have gone away from that kind of study and that kind of push to be better than what we are right now?
Life. We got better things to do.
Hey, there you go, Nick. That's absolutely. I mean, we think we got it. We think we got it. Other things that are more important. And that is a sad commentary. I thought I saw Ricky's hand go up.
I'm sorry, I was rude. I didn't raise my hand.
No, you're fine, Nick. Don't worry about it.
I interrupt Ricky all the time anyway.
Exactly. Let's see if he can unmute himself. Maybe.
Okay.
There we go.
Well, one thing, I don't think that we should include them. Plus, we have TVs, phones. We just involve ourselves in too much other stuff. You know, our world today is, we just think we got to go and do this and do that. We don't put an emphasis on the Bible, even to our kids, and especially the adults. We just don't. And I'm not excusing myself. I'm just as guilty.
I think you are correct on that. One problem that I've seen. Oh yeah, Gary. Yeah.
You know what Ricky was saying. You know, years ago, all the folks used to go visit each other on Sunday. If we didn't go somewhere, somebody come to see us. Nowadays, people don't do that. They're too busy, as he said, doing this, doing that. It's a changing world, and it's not for the good either.
You are right. And also, I'm going to go ahead and say this. And I know that some people like to poke fun at how we are as far as the way we do Sundays, Sunday church services nowadays. But years ago, going to church on Sundays, going to worship on Sundays was an event. It was an all-day affair. You went for services that morning. You had lunch with everybody on the grounds that after church. You probably had some singing that afternoon, and you stayed all day at the building. I mean, it was an event, and like Gary said, you would also see people going and visiting each other. And I don't know where we left it, why we left that thought and went to something different.
Well, the world got busier, and of course, our priorities didn't exactly fall where they should.
You're right. And one thing that really bothers me is and this is no knock on anyone here. I'm not saying that. Trust me, I'm guilty of it as well. But when I hear someone say that the service went too long today, or when I hear someone say that we didn't do X and so during the service, and if we're going to be correct, we got to do X and so. Well, don't do that. Don't. Here's where the preacher comes out in me, but also here's where my old school aggravated side comes out in me as well. Is if we are going to truly look like the first century church, then we are going to meet every single day. We're going to see each other every single day. We're going to continually meet with each other house to house. What did they do? Day by day, they were about the apostles' doctrine. They weren't doing it 1 day or 2 days a week, which I think our tradition of having regimented Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night has destroyed the very foundation of who and what we are. And I know that is kind of a very touchy subject with some. But if you're going to be honest with what the Bible says, then you're going to understand that what the Bible says is that we meet with each other day by day. We talk to each other day by day, and we do this together. We don't regiment ourselves to 4 hours a week, 5 hours a week, whatever the case may be. When we regiment ourselves, when we traditionalize ourselves to certain amounts of time, we become very close to applying rules that are not there. Now, I'm not saying that what Alexander Campbell did with speaking for 12 hours at a debate is what we need to do. I'm not saying that in the slightest. But we do need to understand that if we're going to look like the New Testament church and act like the New Testament church, we can't be beholden to certain traditions that we have pretty much made gospel because of our, quote, busy lives and busy schedule. I don't know what y'all think about that, but that's just kind of my take on that whole situation.
You look at the Amish and they go on Sunday morning, they start out and then they don't come home until late that evening. They visit, they have, singing and everything, and then they have their midweek service or a couple of times a week. So, if we could all be a little bit more like them too, where we did more. But of course, then they don't have all the modern conveniences we have to get into.
Right. And also, too, and I know we've got COVID going on right now, and don't get me started on that. But, when I grew up, one of the big highlights of the week was not going to a football game on a Friday night. It was going to a Friday night singing. We would go, and you would go to Friday night singings on Friday nights, and there might be upwards of 300 people at these Friday night singings. And granted, this was in the state of Alabama. I completely understand that Alabama is one of the hubs of high school and college football. I understand that. But we still did not care because we wanted to be together and wanted to sing together. We would go to Diana singing in Diana, Tennessee, where there's 3,000 people. If some of you might have gone there before, it is wonderful to see. And I have heard people say, I don't have time to go to a singing. How do you not have time? I think we have become so ingratiated in the way we do things that, for one, just throwing it out there, the sports. I think the one issue that we've had over the course of my lifetime, at least, is that we put so much emphasis on let's do things that we stop putting focus on let's do stuff with our brothers and sisters in Christ. And
years ago, the couple, the man worked, the wife stayed at home. The wives did not go on a public job. They stayed at home. Then, a little later on, these factories was working 8 hours. Then all of a sudden, they started working 24 hours. And that changed a lot of things. And, a lot of people, of course, they don't manage their time like they should. And we're guilty of it too, but it's not like it used to be years ago.
And we've got to understand that there's. I understand we've got to do stuff to keep ourselves busy. I guess is the right word for what we're talking about, keeping ourselves busy. But I like how Susan put it in the chat. She said, "We make time for what we want to do. We make excuses for what we don't want to do."
Everybody does that.
And that's the thing is, let's just throw this out there since we're talking about the Restoration Movement. I'm sure that Barton W Stone, Raccoon John Smith, Alexander Campbell, all these different men, B.F. Hall and all of them, they might have had things that they wanted to do. Maybe go horseback riding, maybe go hunting in some respects. I think Raccoon John Smith was an avid hunter in his lifetime. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that they put more time into their extracurriculars than they did into, say, Bible study or trying to study themselves out of their respective denominational backgrounds. Do you think that they would have studied themselves out if they had put their time and effort into their extracurriculars instead of into their study? Probably not. They probably wouldn't have studied themselves out of it. They knew where the emphasis needed to be. The emphasis needed to be on the Bible. I think that's what we have lost sight of, especially in some of our churches, is that we've lost sight of putting emphasis where it needs to be. We put emphasis on certain things to the detriment of others, and we need to make sure, folks, and for those maybe watching this later on our YouTube channel, we need to be sure to put our hearts into study, into preparedness, and that doesn't mean go and get a Bible degree from a Bible university, or get a preaching certificate, or whatever the case may be. It don't matter what type of letters are behind your name. If you don't study, it does not matter one iota. It really doesn't, in the grand scheme of things. We've got to put our time and effort into study. My great-granddad, and I'm sure y'all have these same stories, my great-granddad did not have a college degree when it came to Bible. He studied. And I know more guys who have Bible degrees who have not even half the knowledge of what he had. And he didn't have a Bible degree. Now, I know some people who don't put in enough time and effort who don't have Bible degrees, and it shows. But you have to put your time into what you want to do and what we should want to do. And we've talked about this. We talked about it on Sunday morning. And what we should want to do is put our time and effort into being disciples of Christ, being avid Christians for the cause, being learned people, and continuing to apply the apostles' doctrine to our lives in every respect. Does anybody else have any comments, questions, snide remarks? We will continue our study about Alexander Campbell. We will try to go through that PowerPoint quickly, because we've got only 2 more PowerPoints, and these will go by fairly quickly. But we want to go through a couple more debates that Alexander Campbell will have in his lifetime that are going to be very crucial to what is happening. And we're also going to discuss, and I believe we'll get to this next week, we will discuss a certain situation that will take place in a certain group that he will establish and help establish, called the American Christian Missionary Society, in which that is going to cause a rift between himself and some others of the Restoration movement that you can still feel the effects today of what happened, because he got behind this group, this missionary society, and put all of his eggs in the basket of this missionary society. And it caused a big rift that we will discuss hopefully next week, and we'll discuss why there were some issues with how it was established. But I enjoyed the discussion this evening. Hope that you did too. Y'all have bared with me as we've gone through this. I know this has been sort of a slog to go through at times. A lot of information thrown at you at once. But sometimes we want to go through the historical stuff to understand why certain things happen the way they do, and why certain things need to be addressed now, even as it is looked at in the 21st century. And so we want to discuss those things. For those watching by YouTube, I want to thank you for being with us this evening, and want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to watch this Zoom class. For those who might be watching this later who have questions, would like to know more about the church that is in the New Testament, and the church that Barton W Stone and Alexander Campbell taught themselves into. And notice this, I did not say taught themselves to found, they taught themselves into, which is the church of the New Testament, the church that Jesus Christ established, the church that was established on the day of Pentecost. And so if you have any questions or concerns or would like to know more, then please contact us. You can contact us at our church building at 1301 Middle Road, Fulton, Kentucky 42041. You can also email us at parkwaycocfulton@gmail.com. Call us at 270-472-3494. Message us on Facebook at facebook.com/parkwaycoc. We want to let you know that we love you and we care for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Thank you. And for those watching for those here on the Zoom call, hang around for just a minute after we stop the recording, and we will have a couple of things we want to tell y'all. But for those watching by our YouTube channel, may God bless you. May God give you peace. And until next time, my friends, have a great night.